hear back from him. Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me come.
Call to order the March 11th, 2026 meeting of the Newton School Committee.
Recording in
With the Pledge of
progress.
Allegiance. Our fifth grader leading us tonight is Nishka Chowdhury from Lincoln Elliott School. Dr. Morse, the principal, writes, Nishka likes dancing, including dancing at cultural festivals. She was principal for a day at Lincoln Elliott and did a great job taking over for Dr. Morse. She recently created an engaging ebook narrative about the rainforest. She's been collaborating with her classmates to identify factors that led to Jackie Robinson's success in breaking the color barrier in baseball. And she is an attentive and kind student with many friends. Welcome. We can stand. There's no obligation to participate, but if you are willing and able.
I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would you like to tell us about yourself or your school?
One thing I like about my school is that we have a diverse culture and that we get to recognize and celebrate and embrace everyone's culture, and I think that's really cool.
Awesome.
My personal interest is that I like to do singing and dancing. I do an Indian classical dancing. I learn Indian classical dancing called Odissi, and I do Indian classical singing. And my inspiration for this is my sister, who's in 10th grade.
That's awesome, Nishka.
Congratulations. You did a great job. Thank you.
You're welcome to stay for the whole meeting, but. So we do not have public comment tonight. This is the second in a series of special meetings to review the budget. On Wednesday, March 18th, we will hold a public hearing when we will have public comment. So mark your calendars. We will skip the consent agenda tonight because we're going to do those minutes reviews for the next meeting. So we'll move directly to the superintendent. And we have a note about our agenda because Dr. Flanagan is unfortunately ill. And so we are going to skip that part of the presentation, the teaching and learning, and just do superintendent's update and the OSS presentation.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Second to Nishka doing the pledge today, I have to say that a middle school student from Bigelow simply wrote to me today to tell me I was doing a good job and that he really loved the snow days. And that was a real gift. So I just thought that was really nice. So thank you, Nolan. Appreciate it. His name happened to be Nolan. There's just one slide in your packet that I made for you this evening. It's a graphic. Tamika inspired me to improve my clarity. And so I tried to have a go at it and thought it was a good recap so that in case you missed our last episode of budget FY27, a discussion before the school committee is contemplating with our current city allocation of $14.5 million and what's included in that base budget, including 15 minutes of added elementary minutes on Wednesday lunchtime, yonder pilot continuation at the middle school, but doesn't quite fulfill our math implementation needs and does rely on 5.9 elementary FTEs being removed, as well as some central office cuts. If we were to contemplate additional math, we would need to add middle school math specialists and math pathways advancement and some curriculum work there, which would still rely on 5.9 elementary FTEs and $1.4 million of office cuts, but would allow us to make that target. And then finally, I did make a level service recommendation, which would allow us to both secure our current work and math advancement and give some movement towards the teaching and learning budget that we had proposed. And even that doesn't get us all the way there, but it's a good start. We understand we live in a city ecosystem that may not be able to withstand that level service ask, but I wanted to summarize for the community just the different decisions that the school committee has to make. So with that, I want to just welcome my colleague. Yeah, no? Okay, I wanted to welcome my colleague. Oh, you had a question. Oh, I'm sorry.
So, Dr. Nolan, the 5.9 elementary FTEs are not being removed in the level service 317 bucket?
No, in every single one they are.
Every single one they are.
Yep, that's an enrollment reduction that was pre-budget development that stands.
That was my understanding. Thank you.
Yep. I wanted to share that in these other two pieces is because there was some concern from our elementary educators that there was already a decision made by the school committee about cutting different types of teachers and specialists and special area teachers like library, art, music, et cetera. No decisions in that way have been made, simply the 5.9 teachers reduced for enrollment. So I just want to be really clear about that with our educators. If we do have to make further reductions in order to meet the 314 budget, we will have to come forward with what those reductions will be. Thank you. So with that, I'll welcome my colleague, Casey Noe Miller, who is the Assistant Superintendent for the Office of Student Services. She has received some questions from the school committee and will give a one-part sort of overview of what are the Office of Student Services responsibilities and also what the budget presentation for this year is. Reminder, I've asked the staff to present as if the budget is level. So this is a level service budget presentation. And Casey, thank you.
Thank you.
when
Good
you're ready.
evening, committee. I'm very much looking forward to digging in a bit more tonight. This is a mostly new committee and I haven't spent much time with you all. So I hope tonight will give you an introduction and a deep dive in some respects to the budget for next year. If you will go along with me, this will look a little bit different than it has in the past, in that I will introduce broadly what we do, but also go deep into some areas that I know are of interest to the committee to hopefully better understand what it is that we do and what we support. I first want to just start off by giving folks some context into our district, which is particularly unique, as many of you probably know. We really are a destination school district. We have folks who call us every week. We will get at least one phone call, depending on the level, asking us, I'm from California and I'm looking to buy a house or rent in Newton. Can you tell me a little bit about your special education services? What district should I move into, or what ward should I move into, depending on the neighborhood school and the citywide programs? Additionally, our proximity to some of the world's best hospitals has folks moving into Newton because they either they have teaching fellows, the families themselves find work at Longwood, or they have their students who are part of medical trials or receiving medical treatment outside of school hours, and they still require schooling. And so we have them in our schools, which is pretty unique. I previously worked in Brookline, which is obviously a neighboring community, and we had a similar trend that we saw, which is pretty incredible and very different than other districts in the state. Additionally, for the Office of Student Services, we are very much like the Office of Teaching and Learning in that the decisions that the adults make in our office impact the 11,000 students that we have in the district. So we are pre-K through 22, which is pretty unique in terms of the size of our office and what we do. And I'll go into that more deeply. But I just wanted to sort of set the context for you all to understand better what it is that the Office of Student Services really does. And I think equally as important is that I'm here tonight to really represent the 2,200 students with disabilities who are in our district, who rely on our programming, our services, and our supports in order to thrive and have access to our schools. So I'll start off just sort of conceptualizing more specifically what student service is. I look at it as two pillars. One is a pretty big piece, which is special education, as you all know, and I'll go very deeply tonight into our programming, our numbers. And then there's student supports, and this is the part that reaches the over 11,000 students that we have in the district, looking at counseling supports, clinical supports, teaching kids social emotional learning, and teaching them skills. So we really are the connective tissue. When folks ask, especially folks who are not in education, what is it that you do? I say that I lead adults to set the conditions for teaching and learning to happen in our schools. That's basically what this graphic, I hope, will convey. Every day that we open our doors, this is the baseline of what we do. We provide special education services, mental health and counseling supports. Again, this is pre-K through 22. We provide crisis response and behavioral supports. We coordinate a lot with teaching and learning. We have some very specific state and federal laws that we have to comply with. And then there's family partners. There's a lot of work that we do with families who have students who have needs that might be unexpected. And so a lot of the case, we have our director of the pre-K holding parents' hands really through an entire special education process when they realize that their students may be learning differently than expected through elementary and then transitioning through the grades. And so I want to just highlight here for folks what it is that we do day to day. The next piece, I'm going to dive deeper into our staffing. Much of the work that we do is people-led. We're in the human business, right? Students and adults. And so I want to highlight here what the breakdown is for some of the larger areas of our budget. So we're looking at special education teachers, and you'll see here I have some call-out boxes to give some more detail. These are, again, pre-K to 22, our Unit A positions, our special education teachers, our speech and language pathologists. I tried to find out why certain positions are under certain categories. And my understanding is that we created a long time ago these categories. Now they get put into Munis, and that's where they fall. So I don't know if there's a particular logic, but I'll go through them so you know at least who falls into which role. The next two rows are our aides. So in Newton, we have two different levels of instructional aides. This is in student supports. Aid specialists are behavior technicians. So these are our BTs who have specialized training. And then the next piece is our special education aides who we call teaching assistants. The aid specialists are our BTs. Those are one-to-ones. Sometimes they're shared. And we also have program aides too, because we run so many citywide programs. Falling into that category are also our medical aides. So these are LPNs typically. Back to when I mentioned that we have medically fragile and complex students. These are the folks who are caring for our students with severe diabetes. They've had gastro tubes, genetic disorders, mobility concerns.
I just want you to say what a BT is and what an LPN is, so
Sure.
people
Oh,
understand.
sorry. Yes. So a BT stands for behavior technician, and an LPN is a licensed practitioner nurse, I believe, but it's a nurse. And so they're providing the supports, the mobility feeding, toileting for a lot of our students. Our teaching assistants are more the ones who are in the classrooms with less specialized support. Next, we have our guidance counselors who are overseeing the 504 process at our schools, who are working with students around course selection, general counseling, college and career readiness planning. Non-guidance counselors are our clinicians who are assigned to our citywide programs. So some of the programs that we run, for example, are for students with more severe autism, emotional behavioral challenges. This includes also Central High School clinicians, which is our therapeutic high school day school, which actually is located here at the Ed Center. We have Harbor Middle, where we also have a clinician. Harbor is our 45-day assessment, short-term destabilization or stabilization program for students who need it at the middle school level. I'm actually we have our psychologists and social workers. This next slide here details out what's under other salaries and department heads. So we have our assistant principals for student services at each middle school. They also act as our team specialists who coordinate and facilitate the entire IEP process from signing of the consent to keeping the timelines, running the meetings, and detailing whether or not students are eligible. And for those who are eligible for special education services, these are the folks who ensure that the services are lined up and ready for students. We have coordinators, so we have administrators who oversee speech and language pathologists, OT, PT, social work, SEL, and out of district. We also have all of our OTs and PTs under this line. So folks have that. We have about 25 in total.
Can you just tell people what OT and PT
I'm so
stand
sorry.
for,
I'm in
and SEL?
Yes, SEL is social emotional learning. OTs are occupational therapists and PTs are physical therapists. Next, we have our guidance and special ed department heads and assistant department heads. These folks are all at the high schools. We have our student services secretaries who support the folks listed above there at each school. Then we have school tutors. So we have students who, for one reason or another, they're mostly homebound, or students who are in the hospital who we are still required to educate. And so we will have staff who we pay by the hour to provide tutoring. That's under this line as well. ESY staffing is probably our largest piece here. We spend about $1.2 million a year to fund for staffing for about over 500 students who attend our extended school year. So these are students who require a longer school year for academics, social emotional learning, and additional therapies that we offer. And it ranges between 4, 5, and 6 week programs over the summer across all age groups. Next, we have our safety care trainer. Safety care is the method of physical management that we use for students who require it, who are either a danger to themselves or to others. We have invested in a train the trainer model, but when we pull folks to train, to prepare, and also to be trained, we pay them. So that line item is there as well. We also have student teachers. These are students who are in graduate school who are getting their hours in the classroom and servicing students that way. So that is also in that line item.
Casey, could you just share the decision to pay staff and the safety care training? That is not optional professional development. Can you speak about that just in terms of the restraint expectations at the district and state level?
Sure. So that is the physical management restraints are the last resort. We try all de-escalation tools. That's also required by the state. We are allowed to have, there are regulations around exclusionary timeouts. So for students who, again, are unsafe either to themselves or to others, we do have rooms and spaces in our schools where students are given the opportunity to come and de-escalate. We also have specialized staff. Again, this is regulated by DESE, who's the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We also have to have folks who are physical management trained. They don't have to be at every school, but it's really a safety thing for us, given how large our district is, to ensure that we have folks who are trained.
It also should be noted that there's no longer a provision in Massachusetts since 2015 to suspend or expel students without the obligation to also continue to educate them. So also in the tutoring budget, our special ed and non-special ed students who are suspended or would have formerly been expelled from public schools.
Thank you. Next, I'll do a little bit of a dive into who our students actually are. So this graph here lists out our students who qualify for special education based on the state-required categories in which we find them eligible to receive special education services. What you see here that's unique about us is that state and national trends has specific learning disability as the most prevalent disability category. Here in Newton, a quarter of our students fall into the autism category. When I mentioned earlier about us being a destination school district, this is why. And we're really good at keeping a lot of these students in district. They may not be in their neighborhood schools, but they are in the city of Newton. They make it through the grades. They make it all the way to high school while in Newton, which is something I think we should all be really proud of. But I wanted to see, I wanted the committee to see what the breakdown is. I also wanted to illustrate for you the level of need. So these are DESE categories. The blue and the red, so they are broken down by level of need that is marked by the number of hours or minutes that they are removed from the general education classroom and receiving special education services. So the low percentage is the makeup here in this pie chart of the blue and the red colors. Then you have our moderate, which is pretty sizable, and our students who receive high. So these are who have a high needs designation, and they're receiving their services in our substantially separate programs. I should note here that you'll see that there are about 2,400 students. We have 2,200 on IEPs, but this includes pre-K to 22, all of our students who are in out-of-district placements, and our private school students, which I'll talk a little bit about too.
Alicia, may I just ask a clarifying question?
Please go ahead.
When you say, are these, the number of hours, would that include a student or an aide in the classroom full-time?
That's a great question. I have to look into that. This is physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech, counseling, specially designed instruction. But you mean like if a student had a one-to-one aide, would that show up there?
You have all these students, I'm sorry, forgive me. You have, for example, lots of folks with less than 2 hours out of the classroom, but of that group, or do a fair number of them have full-time aides in the classroom. That would kind of skew the need of those students greatly, it seems to me.
Yeah, I'll look to see. This is these are designations, and I'm not sure if they include aides.
That I think would be extraordinarily informative for us. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that, Alicia. Thank you.
This next piece here is the private school evaluations that drive a lot of the time for our staff that's taken away from those who are actually in seats in our schools. Legally, we are obligated to evaluate students when parents request. These are residents who send their students to private schools, which is obviously their choice, but we are still responsible for evaluating them. And evaluations take anywhere between 5 and 15 hours per evaluator. So we have folks who evaluate, psychologists perform cognitive evaluations, special education teachers perform academic evaluations, speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, depending on the area of suspected disability. So this is 5 to 15 hours per professional to test a student, write a report, and then sit in on the meetings that determine eligibility for our students. So I wanted to just show here, as since July of 2025, we've had 66 private school evaluations. And these are all parent initiated. And I just wanted to give an estimate of the hidden labor that you don't see when you just look at FTEs. So we are responsible for every student in Newton who lives in Newton who go to a private school whose parents request a special education evaluation.
Can you also speak to the services that you have to provide for those same students? Because that is also hidden labor.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for students who do qualify, and let's say they qualify for speech services, our staff provide those services. Families bring them in during school hours to their neighborhood school, and the speech therapist who is assigned to that school provides those services, fits them into their schedule, in addition to those who are in the neighborhood school.
Because private schools are not obligated to provide those services.
So
Question? Would you rather I wait? I'll wait.
Do you want to wait to the end? Okay.
earlier this year, my office ran an analysis of out-of-district placements and our citywide programs to compare the cost. Are we saving money? Separate from our value of keeping students in district, we just wanted to see, and this is a cursory representation of what we found, because a lot of pieces go into this, right? We send, out of our 120, now 27 students who are out of district, we contract with just a little over 60 out-of-district schools, all providing very different services, but we picked the average school that fits the profile. So we picked schools that serve students with autism, out-of-district schools, and compared them to our STRIDE programming. We looked at our schools for students with dyslexia, our Achieve program, our REACH program. And on average, an out-of-district school with tuition and transportation is about $127,000. In district, this is about how much we are spending, and we took partial FTEs. We have a whole methodology that I think the superintendent will provide that goes much more into detail in terms of what these costs include. So there is a payoff here just in terms of looking at cost, but then there's the piece of just what is our community value in terms of keeping students in district. In addition to our salaries and the investments that we make in our adults, there's also non-salary operating costs, which I'd love to go over with the committee. The first being special education transportation. Now, the state does reimburse us some, but not to the full amount. I don't remember what it is for this year. I'm sure
61%. Should be 75, in
Correct.
case the state's listening.
contracted services, given the ticket item, I will go into more specifics on what goes into contracted services. Instructional equipment, I've listed here. We have a lot of students who require augmented communication devices. And so they use iPads to communicate. We also have students who use eye gaze technology to communicate with peers and adults, for which we are responsible for paying. Vision equipment, hardware, software, and other specialized materials. Then we have other expenses, which is training. So I mentioned safety care. We still have to pay the company QBS that provides the safety care manuals and really the curriculum. So that's under there as well. We have our protocols for testing. So when we evaluate students, there's a student manual and then there's a proctor manual. We have to pay for those materials on a yearly basis for each related service area. So there is psychologists, speech and language, occupational therapists and physical therapists, protocols that we use to evaluate, and medical supplies. So this includes gloves, masks, things that you would typically find in a nurse's office. So contracted services, what falls under that? We have a significant contract with the Landmark School, which is a highly reputable school for students with language-based learning disabilities. And I believe we have a at least 15-year relationship with them where they come and they heavily consult with our language-based programs such as Achieve and Reach. They consult with the teachers, they observe. We have 2 dedicated consultants for elementary and secondary. They provide heavy consultation to teachers. They observe them, give them feedback. They do case consultations, and they also actually go out to our other schools that don't have specialized programs, but whose students, they have students who require language-based specially designed instruction. And so we offer that consultation through the contract with Landmark. They have expertise that we do not have in district.
Casey, why is it important that Landmark sort of vets and blesses our language-based learning disability programs? What happens to students if they don't stay with us?
Sure. If they don't, they are going to places like Landmark, Carroll School, Milestones, other out-of-district placements. And you've seen the cost difference between what an out-of-district placement is and what we can provide in-house. In fact, Achieve at Ainger is the only elementary citywide program where we see a savings right off the bat in elementary. The trend that we saw when we did our out-of-district analysis is that we sort of break even at the elementary level, but then as the students get older, tuition is more expensive at out-of-district schools. And that's where we start to see a savings on average of about $1.6 million a year. So just to offer some additional information there on our out-of-district. Contracted services, we have unfortunately a high number of staff absences, particularly with our Unit C staff. So these are our behavior technicians and our instructional aides. And so we look to staffing agencies to provide the sub-coverage. And so this is Sunbelt, Blazerworks. We also contract with a medical transport agency for our students who require nurses or especially trained medical aides to ride the bus with them to and from school. And that's a significant amount. We also, for students for whom English is not their first language, we offer bilingual evaluations in order to evaluate their true cognitive profile. If we did it in English and English is not their first language, we're not getting a true representation of their cognitive profiles or their speech profiles. So depending on what the suspected areas are for the disability. We also provide translations and interpretations in our IEP meetings and also translated documents for families that ask for it. We're also engaging in a caseload and workload analysis this year to take a look at how we are assigning students to staff. And this is our good faith effort in looking at, are we doing this in an efficient manner while maintaining a high level of service still? So to give you an example, what we have been doing is looking at numbers, but numbers don't truly represent the need. So an example is I might be a teacher and I have 12 students on my caseload. My 12 students have learning disabilities, so they require specially designed instruction. I can do that. A teacher next door who's in a STRIDE program who has 6 students, it may look like they have half the work, but they have 6 students with high intense needs. So we really have to look at the workload. On top of that, both of these teachers are invited to IEP meetings. They're invited to child study team meetings, MTSS meetings. So we have to look at, is there a right balance between what my neighboring colleague is attending for meetings and what I am? And of course, the paperwork and the evaluation too. So this will, this just kicked off, this workload analysis. I expect it to be done by the winter of the next school year. It's pretty expansive. So where they will do what's pretty unique about this is that for about a week, and we have to pick a pretty regular week in school, and they invite every staff member in the district to complete a time study. So we look to see how everybody is spending their time. They've had pretty good luck on average, about 60% of folks in districts respond. So we're hoping to get an even a much higher response rate.
I guess I just want to take a moment because many of you over time and other city partners have asked and prior mayors, we do have more special education programs than the average district, and we do have more aides and BTs than other school districts. And you can check that out in our own budget books from the last 20 years. And it's a persistent piece of data that is brought to my attention over and over. So this caseload workload evaluation is done to squarely run at this discussion and to give us the best knowledge possible. The folks that we're working with on this have done something like 4,000 caseload evaluations across the United States and have extensively done Massachusetts, including their most recent client, Lexington Public Schools. So we want that so we can benchmark that for you and also see, relative to the excellent question the mayor just asked about what is a high, medium, low caseload scenario? What does that look like? We want to bring you the confidence in those answers. I also just want to say, in the meantime, these services are enshrined in legal documents called IEPs. And Casey can't wave her magic wand and say, we're going to remove this or add this or reduced by this. This is an area of our budget that cannot be easily reduced. So we just feel that we want the public's confidence on the execution of this. So we're doing everything that we can to do that. I also, at some point, and the school committee members asked a lot of questions about this, we want to talk about the difference between a behavior technician, an aide who is assigned one-to-one to students, and program aides. And you tell me when the best time to do that is, but that's a big question. And there's a perception that there are random folks floating around that have no assignment and that this is expensive part of our budget. Why is that? So if we can address that whenever you feel it's most appropriate.
Okay, I am happy to go deeper, but I do want to give just speak to those 2 points a little bit. So there is a provision in Massachusetts law that allows a parent who has already signed an IEP to stay put on either all, some, or one of the services in a student's IEP. And what we have seen is that we have parents who stay put on the adult that has been assigned to the student on the IEP. So what this means is that if you have a one-to-one aide in the 4th grade and you sign that IEP as a parent, the next year, let's say the student's making progress and the special education team at the school no longer recommends a one-to-one because the student doesn't need it. A parent can assert their stay put rights and keep that one-to-one for 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and beyond. And we see that. And again, given the size of our district, it's not a small number. It's not just aides. We also have parents who stay put on occupational therapy services. So we have students in high school who may be working off of 6th grade occupational therapy goals. But that's staffing and time that we have to budget in for. There was a second piece. Oh, just in terms of lots of adults in schools, I do have to say, and we're fresh off of a working group with the union. It's a joint labor management group yesterday on Unit C positions. And so what some of the staff are reporting is that planning coverage just to open our doors is a daily activity that involves our principals, some of our secretaries, our special education teachers, and general education teachers. And what it looks like essentially is that in order to open our doors, we need adults in classrooms. And when we have multiple absences in a school building, we are scrambling to pull folks. You might be available from 9:30 to 10. I'm going to ask you if you can sit in on this 3rd grade classroom. You're a one-to-one aide and you called out, so I'm going to need you to support this student. We are doing that at every single school, regardless of size. So I can go into much more detail, but I just wanted to paint a picture for you in terms of just what the day-to-day looks like just to open doors.
And that's the substitutes that you're speaking to here in contracted services as well, that we can't always fulfill those positions. And there's some churn in our Unit C.
Correct. Yeah, it's the multiple absences. We recently actually surveyed all of our principals. I didn't get all of them, but I got a good number of them, and that was the biggest concern. I want to give you some insight into our out-of-district tuition costs. Actually, if I could just go back really quickly. In terms of the contracted services, we are likely to actually require more than what's budgeted currently on the books for next year. There's about $789,000, but we're tracking, if we're predicting the need to continue, that line item may have to increase to about $1 million. And most of that is having to sub out. So in terms of out-of-district tuition, I mentioned that in your last documents, you probably have 122 students out of district. In January and February, we had 5 additional students who were placed. So now we have 120 students who are being educated in out-of-district placements, and we have 16 who are currently in our schools in district, but they are awaiting out-of-district placements. They're, given the time of year we are in, we're seeing fewer open seats. And so, but these students can be picked up at any time, offered a seat, and then we'll start paying the out-of-district tuition. Next, we have the circuit breaker reimbursement here. We're expecting about $10 million back from the state. Now, I'm sure you've heard Liam say this a bunch of times now, is that this reimbursement is a year trailing and we get it in quarterly payments. Again, this is not it has not been a fully funded mandate from the state. We are expecting to carry forward about $2.5 million next year. I will leave that to the superintendent and Liam to figure that piece out. While we are projected to spend about $19.2 million in out-of-district tuitions for next year. And the reason is this. Every year, the Operational Services Division, which is a division out of the state, they set a rate by which out-of-district tuitions can increase. We have heard that for next year, it's about 3%, which is pretty average. However, if you may recall, about 4 years ago now, OSD, the Operational Services Division, let every school district in Massachusetts know that due to COVID, they had to increase out-of-district tuitions by 14%. So in that year, I think you remember this, Tamika, and we were lucky enough to have that filled that year by Mayor Fuller. That was, I think, about a $2 million increase that year. So that was a 14% increase. And then from there, we've had a 3%, 3%, 3%. So that's baked into there. We also have out-of-district program restructuring that happens. So what that is an out-of-district school may want to restructure their programming, take a different profile of student. They apply for restructure permission from the state. And when they restructure, they typically increase their tuition because now they're offering a different service and likely a more comprehensive service. Program restructures can happen anytime during the school year. And in some cases, they can back charge you. So we're paying retroactive tuition too in some cases. So that's also baked in there. We have students who are currently in day programs who now require a more intensive program, such as a residential program. Now you're looking at a $200,000 to $250,000 price tag because it's 24 hours care around the school year, also 365. And then we have our pending referrals. So this number 19.2 is what we are seeing in my office because we see the day-to-day movement of the out-of-district churn, if you will. We're projecting this year to be about 17.7 is where we think we will land because of the factors in those 4 bullets. What is in the budget for next year, though, is $18,300,000. So that's about a $900,000 difference that I just want to make this known. It's probably the most volatile part of the student services budget, out-of-district tuition.
Most districts call this the watch list and they don't fully fund it. Could you go back for a second? And just know when I'm interrupting, I'm putting in the questions that members asked along the way on this. And one of the questions was, what are we doing to create more in-house programs to reduce the overall spend here? So you just spoke about, we save $1.6 million a year by creating the programs that we currently have. Can you talk about this tension that you have with me all the time of you proposing this and me telling you we don't have the funding for it?
Oftentimes, and I have to express a lot of gratitude for our staff who are very creative in their thinking and they're willing to stretch. One of the things that attracted me most about coming to Newton really is the like intellectual horsepower that is among our staff. And so at some point, I'm going to run out of my good graces asking folks to do more with less, to be completely honest. But we are being creative with thinking about different program structures, different classrooms, formations in certain classes if we have space. I don't know if that answers your question, but we really do try to do
So
more with less.
last year, you remember we added the REACH program in-house. There is a second cohort that is ready for that, but we did not feel we could bring that forward, given the high number in the budget already, to add another sub-separate program. Now, are we servicing those children? Yes, we are, but that means we're pushing additional supports into the general education classrooms and special ed pullouts that would have been, we think, a potential future cohort that we could make. So, but as Casey said, it takes a year or two before you totally reimburse yourself in making that scenario. And we don't read our budget right now as able to withstand that. But then here we go, the out of district schools raise their tuition willy-nilly and we're here anyway. So I just wanted to share that with you. I also got the answer that you asked, Mayor Laredo, which is that students who are considered high needs are only with a paraprofessional if they're in a sub-separate situation. If they're general education, they're not in that number. They have to be in a sub-separate program in order to be counted.
That pie chart just, excuse me, that
Is
pie
high
chart
needs.
just showed pullouts of kids, did not include you might have a very high need student, for example, who doesn't get pulled out a lot, but has an 8 in the classroom.
No, it's
Right.
all about time out of the classroom measures. So meaning
Yeah.
in substantially separate type programming.
Fine, I think I understand that, thank you. It doesn't identify, though, how many of all our special ed students, how many would be considered low need, middle need, high need?
It does, but it does not, that isn't what that's showing there. It's showing time out of the general education classroom with intensive needs. That's what it's showing, high, medium, or low. We can show you who has those services.
I'm sorry, so if you had an 8 in the classroom, that would be considered a high need student?
Not necessarily, no.
All right, then we can talk about it
Yeah.
offline.
Okay.
Thanks.
I do want to add, and thank you for mentioning REACH. So this is a program for students with dyslexia who also have additional communication needs. And so we will see more of a speech language pathologist time dedicated to that program than you would achieve at Ainger for students with just dyslexia. For REACH, we opened for 4th and 5th grades this year, and we have 8 students right now. Next year, we're projected to have 12. And as the superintendent said, if I look at the needs for special education across the board, that's not where I'm going to put my ask, and I will forecast what that is in the subsequent slides. But
this is a great time for us to talk about what we talked about this morning, which is, so we have the REACH program. It's a sub-separate program. You can have a certain number of students in there with one educator who is the special educator.
state mandated ratio.
That's number is 8, 1 to 8, state requirement with that teacher. You can add 4 more children in there if you add an aide. And then if you add another aide, you can add 2 more children before you have. So districts will do this tipping point thing of like, do we want to keep adding the aides or do we add a second teacher, right? And that's the cost benefit analysis that we're consistently doing. So when you ask about the difference between one-to-one aides and program aides, this is what a program aide allows us to do to reduce costs instead of hiring more teachers. And then if the student also has some other disability like behavior, et cetera, that requires a one-to-one, then that's a different designation, even within a sub-separate program. And we'll say that in many of our severe autism programs, there may be both program aides and one-to-one aides. Those students are at risk for harming self or others, bolting, needing restraint, those types of things. And I share this in depth because I'm proud of the depth of need that the district is able to address, but that comes at a layering of services so that people are not harmed. And I'm sure there are discussions around how that disrupts other classrooms. And, we try to minimize that so that the students in other classrooms can learn alongside these programs in safety and peace.
I do want to add to that we are, last year and this year especially, we're seeing a phenomenon that we are not used to in this district, and I would venture to guess that a lot of other districts also, is that because there are wait lists for out-of-district placements, we have students, not many, but enough, who actually are 2-to-1 or 3-to-1. So these are adults for students. These are our students who elope, so they're running out of the building. And they require more than one adult to supervise them while they're waiting for an out-of-district placement. So I just want to sort of highlight the complexity and the different facets of special education that we're all holding right now. I do want to share some good news, and this is just but a little bit of what we've been doing as part of student services. You may recall that we redeployed the Springboard program, which was a high school program located here at the Education Center. That was a smaller place for students for whom the high schools were too big of a place for them to access academics or even be able to attend classes. So these are students who are chronically absent, who may actually have had leaves of absence due to hospitalizations or medical reasons, could not access school. We redeployed those staff and created those programs in each of our high schools. We partnered with the Brookline Mental Health Center. They run a nationally recognized program called BRYT, B-R-Y-T. I think it's Bridging Resilient Youth in Transition. And we are, so far, actually, we've already served almost double the number of students that Springboard would have typically served. And these students, we've served about 50 students, 25 per school, who have, a majority of whom have already transitioned back to the high school. And it's great because they're located within the high school. One of the things that we heard from students who were in Springboard here was that they don't feel like they're a part of school. They're here with adults. They're with the administrators here. And now I think that there's more of an incentive to attend school when you can be in the school. There's a sense of belonging there for these students. And we have clinicians who are attached to each, and we also have academic support professionals who are attached to each site. 50% of the 50 students are labeled as chronically absent. 89% of the students are coming from a hospital level of care, for which I'm really proud. Not a lot of schools offer this service. In most cases, these students are marked absent. They're not attending school. Our guidance counselors, our clinicians are creating contracts for these students to gradually incorporate them back into the school without a specially designed program. And because our schools are so large, we have a larger number of these students. And so again, this keeps to our community value of inclusion, of trying to keep students in our schools as much as possible. We also have Harbor Middle School, which I mentioned, which is our stabilization program for middle school. They currently have 6 students. You've probably seen it. We have, they operate out of one of the trailers in the Ed Center here. So it's not a large space, but we use day as sort of the opportunity for students to increase their inclusionary opportunities. And we have a wonderful clinician and, again, academic support professionals who've been doing this for over a decade. I welcome any of you to visit, and I'm sure they would be open to it too. It's an incredible program that actually has prevented out-of-district placements at the middle school level. There are 7 referrals right now, 7 middle school referrals for Harbor Middle. So that's the BRYT program. I talked about the REACH program. These students, if we did not have this program, we would be sending them out of district because we don't have a program. But we had enough of a cohort to bring back the program. My understanding is that we had REACH probably about 8 years ago. I don't know why it closed down, maybe because there wasn't enough, but now we're seeing that cohort build up again. Section 504, so these are for students who have disabilities but do not require specially designed instruction. So these are students who need accommodations to access the physical building, or they require some instructional accommodations, but they don't need it to be specially designed. So these are students who have medical needs such as diabetes, who require maybe a different schedule because they have to see the nurse. It can be a broken arm and they need extra time writing on tests, or they need a scribe. We have students with ADHD who don't require specially designed instruction, but they do require some accommodations. These are Section 504 plans. I can get you the full number that we have in the district, so you have an idea, but our social workers at the elementary school oversee 504 plans, eligibility, development of plans, and implementation of services. So they coordinate all of that in addition to seeing students. Our counselors at the middle and high schools facilitate this process. This year, we overhauled the manual, which includes, it explains our practices, it standardizes our practices so that our schools are offering the same level of service at every single school. And so we overhauled that. We're in the process of training everybody who coordinates 504 services. Then we also have a dedicated person who runs through our circuit breaker claiming, which happens, it actually starts this month. And it's a painstaking process where you go through every single IEP that we believe meets the foundation of service that would then allow us to claim reimbursement. And that's going through 2,400 IEPs and looking at it and using the state system and doing that piece. Again, this is the fiscal responsibility that we are contributing to the budget. We have ongoing partnerships and collaborations with Riverside, thanks to a contract out of the mayor's office. They offer crisis support. So for students who we are asking to either for support to stabilize students in our schools. Wayfinder and SABRS are a social emotional learning curriculum. SABRS is our way to assess our students' social emotional functioning so that we can provide targeted supports for our students. AbleSpace is a new partnership this year. This helps us standardize a way for our service providers to track services, but then also it collects the data and then allows us to see trends easily so that when we are at the IEP meeting, we can report very easily where our students are. When I was a school psychologist, I was graphing this on my own. I was using computer programs. You know, it wasn't as easy as it is with AbleSpace now, and I'm hoping that we can continue that partnership with them. And then we have the interdepartmental partnership this year, more so than ever with teaching and learning. Our folks are participating in the curriculum reviews, program reviews, and it's been really helpful. We partner also with the Office of English Language Learning as well with teaching and learning. The scale here, the part on the left, actually should say that in the last few years, we've reduced by 2 full-time administrator positions. Between these two, they're overseeing 504s, private school testing, clinical supports, and mental health services. So these are administrators who oversee the adults in the district who are doing it. Right now, I am doing that. I have assumed that. Some of my other administrators have assumed these roles. This is in good faith showing the community that we are trying, or the committee, that we are trying to continue with the services that we have always provided, but with less. I put this slide here because I want folks to understand, I talked about the expertise that all of our staff have. And when we talk about inclusion, we're not talking about a place. We're actually talking about what it means when a student is included in recess, in phys ed, in math, all the other academics. That piece, how do we make it authentic and meaningful for our students? When our student services administrators meet every other Friday, these are the things that we talk about, which is just what are the practices, the systems that we can build to ensure that our teachers are working within the conditions that they can provide meaningful experiences for our students. I do want to share some current realities so that the committee understands sort of just what we are sitting with. I mentioned the high numbers of evaluations. Yes, there are only 66, but there are 66. So if I am an evaluator, I'm having to take on 5 or 10 more are students who I don't even know. But legally, I have to evaluate them. That is actually a real time constraint on our folks. Now, the presentations on Monday and the one from Dr. Colby, I believe that was 2 weeks ago at this point, shows that an investment in MTSS makes a difference. However, in special ed, because we have families who stay put, and because IEPs are reviewed at an annual basis, it will take a little bit longer to see the pressure come off of special ed and back onto the MTSS system, where some of it really does rest. These are students who require tier 2, tier 3 supports, but instead, because we haven't had it, it's special ed. On the student support side of the house, we're seeing rates of suicidal ideation at our secondary levels remain pretty steady. We just finished administering the signs of suicide assessment and education module for our students who screen in as potentially being suicidal. So I have those numbers and I've compared them to the last 2 years, and they are about the same. What we are seeing is more elementary students for whom we've had to respond who have expressed suicidal ideations. Numbers for behavioral mental health episodes remain about the same. Folks often ask, like, why do we think that is? What's going on? You know, it's hard to say. There's COVID. We're still seeing some remnants of that, but there's just rising stress in our students. There's overstimulation, cell phones. Information is available at students' fingertips whenever they want, if they have the capacity to do so. And kids' lives are a little bit more complex these days, and we're seeing it. And this goes back, this slide here really just goes back to how I started, which is that we are the connective tissue. And when a student's need escalates, we have to be there to stabilize. Because again, we're here to do all the pieces to support teaching and learning. And so all those nooks and crannies, the Office of Student Services is filling in those nooks and crannies to make sure that it happens. But we're doing it by stretching a lot of our folks. So this piece here really is, I want to talk about a specific strain on our system for next year. We have 2 cohorts moving up to day middle school into 2 specialized programs. One is Bridge, which services our students with significant social emotional behavioral needs, and Reflections that services our students with complex medical and physical needs. I have here some numbers to share with you. So right now in the Bridge program, we have 1 clinician. That clinician is tasked with providing therapy to students. He's also serving as a coordinator of sorts. So he's helping out with staffing in the mornings when folks are out, so coverage. He's also training the behavioral technicians and the teacher aides in those programs on therapeutic supports. He's also a disciplinarian, which in the world of clinicians, you don't want to mix the 2 roles. But that is what we are operating off of at the moment. In the Reflections program, there are currently 10 students and only 1 of the 10 is in 8th grade. Next year, we have 5 incoming students into the Reflections program. 2 are coming from the Williams Reflections program. The other 3 are coming from the other elementary schools. What's different about this cohort than the existing one at day is that the students moving up are more medically and cognitively complex. That requires a different skill set, and it really requires 2 separate groupings within Reflections. That is a need that that's known, and unless all 5 of these students move out of Newton, we are expecting and we welcome them at day. It's unique because we have 2 citywide programs in 1 building. But you all know the size of our other schools, our other middle schools, and we also have other programs at other schools.
How many programs at Brown?
There are 3 programs at Brown. And so we have 3 autism strand programs at Brown, and we have 2 programs at Oak Hill. We do have the CAPS program. Forgive me, I don't remember the acronym, but it's an educational collaborative out of Western Mass. And we have signed a contract to house their middle school and high school program for deaf and hard of hearing students. So we are the out-of-district placement for students who are coming through CAPS, which is a educational collaborative for some western suburbs.
So let's pause for a second because there are two questions here. So are there any Newton students in the CAPS program at the middle school or the high school
So
that
in
are
the-
Newton students?
Yes, so in the last 2 years, we have not had one Newton resident a part of the middle or the high school programs, which is located at Newton North.
So this is the equivalent of us renting that space to the Suzuki School, which you just let us know. And students, they're not our students, but they tuition in and they pay us for the services that they receive there.
How much do we get?
So we get about $90,000 as a space rental total.
And what does it cost us to, if I may, Madam Chair, what does it cost us in terms of support? Anything? Do we provide any kinds of support, or do we just get $90,000?
No, we provide, obviously, the space. We provide the inclusionary classroom. So our general education teachers will have deaf and hard of hearing students in their classes. So staff salary, but also at the high school, they access the guidance counselors, they access clinicians. I mean, really the entire school, they can, the students in the CAPS program can also participate in our after-school activities.
So have we done any kind of financial analysis to determine if this 90,000 is even
So
sufficient
hold
to
up,
cover
that's what I
costs?
would like to now ask you about. So there was a question about why aren't we a member of more collaboratives like CAPS? And this is the reason, Mayor. What do we get out of being in a collaborative as a district like Newton?
Yeah, so we actually looked at this a couple of years ago with our out-of-district coordinator, and what the out-of-district, what the Ed Collaborative schools offer, we wouldn't actually take up on a lot of the services because we need more specialized and intense out-of-district placement options. So while being a member, you do get a little bit of a discount, we don't actually, there aren't a lot of schools that we would elect into.
The
Can I-
EDCO used to be the collaborative that the district was a member of. Next door in Natick, I was the chair of the committee for Accept Collaborative. Each of these collaboratives in the state are losing money at an extreme rate. EDCO went bankrupt and there was a obligation to the city of Newton that we had to pay to help that resolve. Collaboratives do a lot of things together, like buy fuel oil together, supplies. And the idea is for like a small place like Natick, they can get special ed services that they can't afford to provide. We provide all those things and more intensive programs. So things like that are not advantageous to us. You should also note that we need space at the Bigelow Middle School due to the Cabot restructuring. So we are going to need to get out of the business of renting that space shortly.
So
Mayor Loreto, I think we should wait until the end and just get through this presentation and
Can I do a 30-second on Newton's history with an educational collaborative, EDCO?
I think since we've had some comments, you give yours and then I'm going to say no more comments till the end of the presentation, all right?
Appreciate Further context on why membership in an educational collaborative may seem like a good idea for a smaller district. Many of them, it is a good idea. For a district of Newton's size and complexity, we can do a lot in-house. However, cautionary note on educational collaboratives. When I joined the school committee 6 years ago, this was my assignment, to be the school committee representative on the EDCO collaborative. Shortly thereafter, within months, this collaborative was bankrupt and Newton had to end up paying $300,000 that the city backstopped. Thank you then Mayor Fuller for those allotments. That money didn't have to come out of the school budget. Cautionary note, very much in your ears.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So this is a piece that I don't take lightly. I hear from coordinators, I hear from staff themselves who, again, incredibly experienced, very dedicated, but there is burnout. And I don't want to see folks leave Newton because of it. I worry about our programs that we have built in terms of their stability, for student safety, staff safety, I will add also. And then I don't want to have to send students out of district if we don't have to, if we can avoid it. I want to keep them in district. I want to keep to the spirit of what our value has been for decades at this point. Hopefully, I've showed you a little bit into how volatile our out-of-district line item is in our budget. These are goals that I'm listing here for folks, but if you will just entertain me for 30 seconds, this is not my dream list, but this is the list of FTEs that I am officially asking for, if there is absolutely any room here, is team specialists at our secondary levels. Team specialists, we have them at our elementary schools, and we have one each at our high schools. These are the folks who coordinate all of the IEP movement. They make sure that we are in line with compliance to state and federal laws. They oversee all the timelines. They make sure that the services that we offer in special ed are implemented. So that's 8 team specialists is what I would absolutely love. My team would not forgive me if I did not mention these publicly. I would love to see special ed teachers who have specialized reading experience to teach reading skills at our secondary level. The need is there. So these are middle and high schoolers who still need to learn how to read.
You pay contracted services for those now because we can't find qualified teachers, correct?
Correct. Yes, we don't have folks applying. A psychologist district-wide assigned to do the private school evaluations. There are psychologists out there who love to test. They don't want to work in counseling. They don't want to do MTSS. They're just psychometricians. I would love a director of clinical services and mental health. We have, as you've seen, a number, I think it was 27 or 28 psychologists, 27 social workers, a number of clinicians who are essentially providing clinical supervision to each other. But in a true clinical model, you have somebody with the experience to provide this clinical supervision that then is passed on to students in their practice. That should be a weekly practice where clinicians can case consult. An additional FTE for the unknowns, but the knowns. So the move-ins, the medically complex students who need a medical aid. We have a student who is 2 years old who will age into our preschool this summer. Forgive me, I don't have a description of his needs, but I do know that he has had a liver transplant and has some other complex medical issues that will require him to have a medical aid, and he's only 3. And we will likely have him, should he stay a resident of Newton, until he's 22 years old because his needs are that high. And we have a number of those. That's just one example. But this is also if there are more students for REACH. I don't want to send them out of district and spend $60,000 on out-of-district tuition when I can hire an aide, let's say, to increase our ratios with the state. So this would include either a teaching assistant or a partial FTE for increased speech services because we're increasing the number of students who are going to REACH. While they are small, they are mighty. The Ward and Underwood School are under-resourced in psychologists because for some reason we have a lot of private school evaluations that come out of Ward especially, and Underwood for different reasons.
Casey, the only question that is here that we didn't hit squarely in the presentation, so good job, we got everything, is the difference between what psychologists and social workers and guidance counselors do. And maybe you could speak also to the last contract negotiations that mandated social workers at every single school K-8, pre-K to 8.
Sure. So the training is different, though there is some overlap in terms of counseling services. For psychologists, there's additional training in special education law that social workers just don't get in their training. Psychologists also provide psychological evaluations. They have training in MTSS. In both roles are trained in stabilization and de-escalation. I mentioned the counseling services, but they really complement each other. Social workers are trained to work with outside agencies and partners that are a part of a student's level of care provided by outside agencies. So they're partnering with DCF, I can't remember the acronym, but if they are, they have family partners. Family partners are folks who are coming in and they're providing behavioral training to families, parents, and students in the home. Our social workers will be in close contact with these folks so that we can mirror the same level of support in schools so that kids can continue to make effective progress. Psychologists are, I think I mentioned the psychometrician piece, so their roles are a little bit different, but they complement each other. Guidance counselors I see as are more different than the first two roles in that they are doing, it's sort of your traditional guidance counseling in terms of college and career readiness, course selections. We do have some guidance school counselors who are also clinicians. So they're providing that level of service to students if they have the appropriate licensure.
And when you say clinicians, you mean that they are school counselors, not guidance counselors or career counselors. They're actually providing therapeutic services to students.
Correct, yes. They are licensed independent clinical social workers, LICSWs.
And this is different from when many of us were in school, when guidance counselors really just helped you take your ASVABs and your SATs and you were on your way.
And helped you with your schedule.
Right.
Yes, but we do provide those services. That concludes my presentation. I appreciate the time that you gave me tonight, and I'm happy to stay and talk more.
Thank you. Questions? Linda, Tamika, Victor, Linda.
I guess it's called the Stay Put Right. Is that, is the child eligible for the rest of their time in Newton Public Schools? Like, say they had something in 4th grade, and are they eligible for that all the way through the rest of their time at MPS?
Essentially, yes. So an IEP, an individualized education plan, is reviewed every year. That's just federal law. And so every year we will review the student's progress. And if we feel that they still no longer need the service, we will recommend to take that off. But a parent can assert their stay put right every single year until they graduate. And we have that.
And we can take them to a hearing with the Bureau of Special Education Appeals, but then we would incur the legal cost of doing that.
Yeah.
And it puts our staff on the stand, and I try not to do that if I don't have to.
Yeah. Thank you.
Tamika?
Thanks, Alicia. Thank you, Casey, for a very comprehensive, good overview, making sure that we're all on level footing of understanding the scope of student services, what it entails, who we service. Couple of questions based on your presentation tonight. The first is you gave a list of you just verbalized the list of positions that you would hope to be able to fund into next year. You said 8 team specialists, 1 psychologist district-wide, 1 director of services and mental health, 1 FTE for unknown responses, 1 Ward Underwood psychologist. You didn't mention the number of specialized secondary SPED teachers you were hoping to achieve.
That would be 4.
4. Okay.
Yep. 1 for each high school and 2 to split between the 4 middle schools.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Let's see. Working backwards.
That's going to confuse folks because we don't have 4 high schools. So why did you
Did I say 4?
four?
So sorry.
Yeah, you mean 2 for each high school?
Correct, 4 total.
Catch. I just was like, sure. 4.
I get a lot of next
down.
day emails like, did we grow 2 high schools?
Next question. This is not a question. This is a celebration moment. Awesome data around Bright. I'm so happy that that's a proof of concept is really coming to fruition on that. That's wonderful. You also mentioned when you were talking about that there were you were inviting visits of the school committee into some of these specialized programs. That's something that the school committee, I think, did in the last, comprehensive way, like 2-3 years ago. I'm not quite sure, but I would encourage us to visit some of these programs, especially the many that are new since that time. it really does improve our understanding about the cost drivers and the excellent staff that we have servicing children in the district. Next one. Let's
Can I
see.
just add a caveat
Yes,
to
of
that?
course.
Because we do have students where they're particularly sensitive to visitors and we don't want to disrupt anything that's happening. So just check with the staff, but in general, it's fine and they welcome it.
So I'm talking about working with you and your team to make sure we put together something that's appropriate for the students and, you know, really illustrative of the complexity of the needs and the, you know, just how wonderful our services are for the school committee. So, let's see. I wanted to talk a little bit about the stay put order, like Linda was talking about. You gave an example of a 6th grade student with occupational therapy, or a high school student whose stay put order traces back to, say, 6th grade. Does that mean that the stay put order for occupational therapy would stay stuck in place? It wouldn't change, it wouldn't grow and progress because the district disputes or has disputes the need for those services. So it's essentially the 6th grade occupational therapy services would persist into high school.
Yeah, if I can put a finer point on that, it would be the 6th grade goals that were appropriate for the student when they were in 6th grade that the parent can stay put on. We're not making 7th grade goals, 8th grade goals, 9th grade goals as they make their way. They're staying put on 6th grade goals
Gotcha.
because we are in dispute because we believe that the student has achieved those 6th grade goals, but a parent does have a right to assert.
Okay, thank you. Also, the caseload analysis that you mentioned, when will that work be completed?
By next fall. Also, spoiler alert, we've been notified by DESE that we are next after Brookline for a comprehensive district review of all operations and activities. So we believe that this and a mental health caseload review is really going to be important when we interact with DESE in that way. So that will start in the spring, will commence in the fall, and then we'll have to present it to DESE in the spring, but we'll present it to you before that.
I don't know if I said this, but the caseload workload review looks at Unit A and Unit C. So to the mayor's questions about the aides, they will look at that too.
And then my last one, so LPNs. I don't know why that's never really popped out until you broke out the acronym of licensed practical nurse. My mother is an LPN, by the way, so shout out to those folks. Most of our nurses the costs of them are picked up by the city. Does that exclude these specific LPNs?
Correct.
And do you have any idea as to why that is?
The only thing that the city picks up, to be clear, is the school nurse program. That was done under Mayor Cohen. That's been carried forward. We've never picked up special ed costs as part of a city budget, nor are we going to.
No, that's not where I'm going with this, although thanks for heading it off. I'm talking more about just whether, I guess the question is whether when Mayor Cohen implemented the provision of or paying for school nurses through the city side of the budget, whether there were these specialized nurses specific to student caseloads. And
When was that, Mayor Laredo? What
I
year?
don't know the answer to that. I certainly expect that we've had some kind of nursing assistance for many years as part of our special ed program. We've had complicated, difficult situations with kids, but the nursing program was designed as essentially public health. That's why the city decided to pay for it. It's something I think we do a good job of, but we're not picking up any other nursing costs. I just want to be very clear about that.
got you.
Okay.
It wasn't where I was headed. It was simply an understanding of how we're funding this one as opposed to the others, but I got it. Appreciate it.
I mean, I'll just tell you historically, it certainly wasn't required in the same way, nor were medical assistants within schools. Those students often went to other schools. I also just want to say that, modern medicine has meant that students who would have been institutionalized into medical programs and hospitals before just aren't there. And that is a triumph for for families, but it does mean that that burden comes to schools for changing colostomy bags, for severe epileptics, I mean, these are things that as a new teacher, we just did not contend with. I'm going to tell you, it gets more complicated every year. This year alone, state regulations, interstate nursing regulations have changed. Our nurses can no longer travel on interstate field trips with our students. So then we have to rent them in other states. So, you know, I know the costs of our budget, it surprises everyone. The mandates should also shock you that these are the things that districts are expected to do that were coming from different sectors of public service budgets or private budgets in other times in history. So it is different.
Get it. Thank you, Casey. I'm all set.
Is that just a sec? Victor, Jonathan, Linda, Mayor Laredo.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Assistant Superintendent. Appreciate you being here as always. I have, I'll try to keep it down to 2 to 3 questions. What, generally speaking, what happens when, let's say there's a, take MECO, for example, when a MECO student comes to Newton, if they're assessed to need out-of-district placement, how does I'm not sure this is in your space or in Liam's space, but how does, generally speaking, the funding work? Does that come from the sending district to the receiving district as us, and then ultimately to the OD district, or is it?
So start the sentence for me again.
Yeah, sorry. So
is it a Newton resident student?
No, let's say there's a non-Newton resident student who's coming into the Newton system, but then it requires, say, there's a development later on in their journey.
Yeah.
They then require out-of-district placement.
Yeah. So do you mean the children of our staff or the children of MECO that are MECO students? So that's a complicated question. If we cannot serve the student, then we need to go through the process to find out where they can be served. If the student is a Boston Public Schools student, then we have to interact with Boston Public Schools to say, do you have the program for this student? And so that one outcome might be tuitioning the student back to Boston. One outcome may be that Boston cannot service the student either. So then there would be an out-of-district placement scenario. We would then go through a legally mandated process that would return the student's expense back to Boston for an out-of-district placement that was agreed upon by all the parties. So that would go back to Boston.
Got it.
For students who are staff members, it's a different process. That expense will go to the district that from which they come under certain circumstances based on our collective bargaining agreements.
Okay, got it. Thank you for that clarity. Got it. Second one is the one that's been very much on my mind to some extent is you brought up a great example where there may be aids that are on a one-to-one basis that were issued and earlier assigned, awarded, given. But then the needs may change. And I've actually seen in other districts where, there's a student who actually doesn't want the aid anymore for social reasons and getting used to it. Have you seen any sort of patterns about when the conversations and understandably a lot of parents, I think, don't want to get rid of it because they don't know what they're losing, right, as a result of that. But what has been more successful in terms of the parents who have kind of, I guess, come to say, oh, okay, now I understand my child doesn't need this anymore, versus those who are perhaps a little bit more reluctant? Is there any particular distinction in that factor, or something that has been more successful in explaining to them why that service may not be needed anymore?
Are you asking if there are trends that we are seeing that sort of tips the scales for families to give up the aid, the one-to-one aid?
Yeah.
Yeah, age certainly is a factor. So when we mention what a typical day looks like, let's say when you're at Newton North with an adult who follows you around, that helps, I think, for parents, because as we're thinking about independence as they graduate, you're not always going to have an adult with you. You wouldn't at a workplace, right? And so those kinds of conversations happen at IEP meetings. But we do have families who students aren't going to graduate at age 18 and they stay with us. The hard part is that, when these families apply for supports through agencies for adults with disabilities, if you show a high level of need, you're less likely actually to get the supports. So that's been helpful also.
Got it. Thank you. And then the last one, just because I'm meeting with our CPAC friends on next Thursday. Anything from your perspective in terms of what the school committee can do to better support you and that relationship with CPAC, I guess? However you want to interpret that.
What the school committee can do to support the,
What can I do better to help
Relationship.
support you? Let's put it that way.
I'd love to spend some time with you and talk with, much of what I talked about tonight in terms of what our needs are. The CPAC board, I meet with them monthly and they are fantastic. They are willing to partner, support. We have a great relationship. So if you want to join too, I would welcome that.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate it.
Jonathan?
Thank you. Mike, better. Thank you. This is super helpful. I have a couple of questions. How do I, in no specific order here, like how do I interpret the out of district placement cost data that you shared this evening? Is this $1 million worth of budget risk that is not included in the numbers that we've been looking at so far? Is that what I heard tonight?
Are you meaning that when she indicated that there's a watch list that could potentially mean $900,000 more of spend? Or are you speaking of those?
Yes, I'm looking at these two pages that say the 788 could really be $1 million.
Yep.
And the 18.3 is probably really 19.2.
Could be.
And so we actually have $1.1 million worth of budget risk that
That's
we
right.
have not been contemplating.
Which is
so far.
typical for most districts to do. We're waiting for circuit breaker rates to, what is the real deal to reduce that
This
scenario.
is not a question of rate, though. This is not a question of reimbursement rate.
Right.
This is a question of projected dollars of cost based on quantity.
We
and-
also know there are not beds or spaces available in these schools to take them at that rate unless something really changes fast.
So this is the conceptual number if everything worked out just fine, but the practical reality, we have high confidence is less than that.
We don't know.
Right.
Okay.
So I can give you an example. So that watch list is, we're watching that activity, our out of district coordinator, and in student services, we have a finance manager. So we have 16 kids essentially on deck waiting for placements.
Mhm.
Let's say 2 of them are placed tomorrow, then we're adding out of district tuition to this year's budget from March to June, which is not a full year's tuition, but that gets added. But let's say we bring back 2 kids between now and June. So that may not be the full cost that we thought, but I want to project out what could be. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay, I'm happy to talk more about it
Yeah,
offline if
we
you
can,
can.
we can
Yeah.
talk. Maybe we can take that one offline.
One additional question. I think you mentioned what your projection was versus your new, or what your budgeted amount was for this year and your new projection. And didn't we gain there? What did you say those numbers were?
Gain?
1.6 million.
Yeah, so it could go either way. It sort of sounds like.
Okay, so last year we would have said the same thing, but it actually broke the other direction for $1.6 million.
I hesitate to say that. Liam, is that a yes or a no? He's like, oh no, I have to go.
Sorry, I tried to keep you out.
Good evening, everyone. So tuition has probably been one of the most volatile areas that Casey talked about us here. We have in the past typically had estimates from the Student Services Department, and we've typically had a percentage under that request that we've had. We have, in some cases, been over, in some cases, been under. So right now, we've looked at this, and we look at this basically every month on the numbers of pieces. So there are years. So for example, this year we were tracking, and we're looking like we're going to be a little bit over our number, but we're also getting actually about $1 million more in circuit breakers. So we reported in the fiscal and ops where they were over in our tuitions in aggregate.
Okay.
So this is a question for the school committee, and I think it's a good discussion. Do we want to increase the amount that we're budgeting right now? We're at 18.3 is kind of our current estimate for 2027. Casey was talking about a potentially 19.2, 19.3 number. It's another $1 million. So if we want to add that, that's a very safe, that's what she's
I
tracking.
don't want to add it. I'm trying to figure out if you think it's going to come in there.
Well, that's
Exactly.
why my hair turns gray when you say like, let's take on some risk in substitutes because I'm already dying on out of district.
So
Okay.
this becomes a real challenging piece for us, and it's something obviously we need to track and report on. But what we've seen though, that I think Casey and what they have, they've got a move list. And what I have seen with Amanda Collins is the number of changes. So there are people being placed out, but there are also people aging out or actually moving as well. So we actually have people that are moving off that list as well during the year. And then when you've got this addition of basically a lot of places that are full right now, these placements can take some time. And so you're only looking at kind of fractions of the year.
Got it. That's helpful. Thank you very much.
I do want to say there's a position associated with this, which is the out-of-district coordinator, whose job it is to be savvy and in those schools. That we have the responsibility as the LEA to inspect those programs, right? So Casey can't go to like 52 different out-of-district placements all the time to ensure that students are being adequately served, not abused, and not neglected. That still resides with us as the LEA for the district. So that person's entire job is to monitor those 100 students across the entire state. And sometimes more increasingly, there's a whole podcast about this, in Colorado, where lots of people are being sent to these schools, these residential schools out of state that have special areas for behavioral and emotional students. So Google it, you can see it. But I just want you to know, there've been a lot of questions about why the expansion of administrators at the central office. This person has a full-time job of visiting over 100 schools all the time to ensure that no student is being abused or neglected.
Okay.
Back to Tamika's comment about visiting programs, the out-of-district coordinator has offered actually to speak with school committee about the out-of-district process. I do want to add, because I believe there was a question about this. This year, we've been able to bring back to district 5 students, and I believe one of them was in a residential placement. So back into either high school
Great.
or middle school.
Okay, that's great. And just sticking with the out-of-district piece for a moment, in the math, sorry, Liam, I might make you come back here, but in the math here, we're showing this circuit breaker reduction
For the carry forward?
for the carry forward. But my understanding is money's fungible, and so it's not like this carry forward has any particular impact in the way that we think about budgeting or services within special ed, with student services specifically, right? This is just that historically we've conflated these two things.
We have historically conflated them. It is basically a number that we use. We carry it forward in what's called a circuit breaker account. The money technically can only be used to offset direct special education, but in a sense, it is really a district-wide.
It's a global, it's money.
District-wide global money.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
exactly right.
And just to make sure I'm perfectly clear, in the existing budget proposal, there is no assumption that we will need to carry forward money in the future, correct?
There is $2.5 million assumption for next year. So we have
From 20 of funding that comes out as a
Yep.
as a source of funding,
Yes.
but there is no use of funding in the budget next year.
Yes,
That is
there
money from
is use.
28.
no matter what budget model we choose, 314, 315, 317, $2.5 million of money this year
Yep.
is being used to fund next year.
Correct.
And a
Yep.
spending freeze is currently on to make that dream a reality.
I'm completely aligned with that. Ben is giving me the yes, yes, yes.
There's no
I-
budget line, Dr. Nolan, in the 27 budget that says 2.5.
Save money for 28.
Correct.
Well, no, not yet.
There's
Okay.
that. There's
Okay,
that-
no, that's good. I'm
That's
good.
been the tradition. So I don't.
I get it. I'm good.
I know we all hate it, but.
It was a mechanical question. Okay. All right. I'm good there. Can I ask
Yes, you have
one
the
more
floor.
thing? I still have the floor here. Okay. As I understand, if I look at the MTS, so the page here that talks a little bit about sort of like MTSS as the strategic solution for all of this makes me very excited, because I think there's from my point of view, there's like 2 really big things we get out of this, right? Like the first and most important one is the idea that we actually have students who are learning in the classroom with their peers in the general education program, along with the way that we want kids to learn. And that's actually like the best possible outcome for everybody. Forget about whether it costs more or costs less, right? Like that's like the first thing that I care about in that. The second thing that we care about is actually less cost to serve, because we're teaching kids the right way from the beginning. And so we get to a really good place. How do I think about the 85, and if we need to come back to this is okay, but like I go back to kind of like the $85 million of total budget for the program. How do I, or 86 really, 85.9?
Which program?
For the student services program in general, right? So I just go here to this page. and we say that the budget for 29, or for 27 rather, is 85,958,000. What's that? Okay, so that's just staffing. That's before we even get to the other pieces.
Correct.
Okay. How do I think about some of this isn't subject to MTSS improvement, right? Like significant portions of this are students that we know have needs that aren't going to be met by MTSS. Significant portions of this are structural program things that we're going to need and want to maintain by both regulation and do the right thing no matter what. Do we have some sense for like how much of this is addressable, like how much of this we can get back in the MTSS program? Because whether it takes 5 years, because there's there's stay put rights and things, and I get that, right? Like whether it takes some time or not, like do we have a sense for how much of this is subject to that transformation?
So
Yeah.
Casey, we actually are trying to do a use case that Ben has asked us the same question. I don't know if you guys are on the same brainwave, but
Yeah.
so we are trying to give you that return on investment in a different way.
Yeah.
We've talked about it, in the broadest sense. So we just need to get to Friday and we will bring that to you next week.
I will sit tight. Okay, got it. I had one more question if I can. Can we talk for one more minute about the CAPS and the collaboration and the collaborative
Yeah.
program?
Yeah,
So
of course.
we have students in CAP, like there's Newton students who participate in CAPS?
No.
Okay, so we rent space, that part I got. We also effectively provide, I think what I heard in the discussion is we also provide access to our guidance counselors and to a whole bunch of other functions within our school system to the kids who come in through the CAPS program.
That's right.
Got it.
Yep. Sports, after school clubs.
Got it.
Mhm.
Got it. And these are mostly students coming in from, sounds like Western Mass,
Correct.
on a
Yep.
daily basis?
Yep. So we're essentially an out-of-district school
Yes.
for these students. So
Got it.
these parents who are in Leominster signed an IEP
Yep.
for their deaf child to attend school at Bigelow.
Got it. That
Yeah.
makes total sense. But we don't charge like a per student out of district placement tuition like we pay in other places.
Well,
We
if
just
it was
charge
the
this rate.
superintendent at the time of that contract, we would be doing that.
Got it. How
If
long
I was
does,
in my seat, then I would have.
okay, then we're all on the same brain
Yes,
wave
sir.
here. Okay.
But you should know we don't provide the specialized service there. Like we do not provide the teachers of deaf and hard of hearing. We just they just get to be included in our general ed and they provide all the other teachers so it's an open
So it's like kind of half and half.
half and half, right?
Yeah.
But
So
to your point, the tuition there should have been a tuition fee associated with the rental.
And how long does that program go for? Like, when do we get to have a conversation about that?
that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure.
So I am entirely sure.
I'm going for the record of how many times I can bring Liam back.
It's
to the lectern
this
here.
contract is ending this year, and
Oh,
we
okay.
are just they have been notified to that effect.
Got it. Okay. I got it. Thank you.
You're almost next. I've got Linda first and then
Sure.
Mayor. Linda, do you have questions?
Yes, I did. You talked about the incoming cohort at Day and the added challenges, complexities that brings on. And I was curious, for the two specific programs that are at Day, are they synergistic to one another? Like, is there a reason why those two specific programs are, physically adjacent to one another?
I don't know because those programs have existed before me in terms of being at Day. I don't know, Tamika, Liam, I don't know. It may have been a space thing. I know, actually, no. Bridge used to be, a version of Bridge used to be at Bigelow.
I was just asking the question, thinking that it sounds like there's some intrepidation around the incoming cohort. So would it make sense to have split them differently with some of the other programs that are available at the other middle schools? But maybe that's geographically not possible.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can speak to is just Day Middle School actually did have a renovation. I think it was in around 2010, 2013 range. You know, specifically, there was a piece at that time, I believe, about adding some special education programming. There was definitely a push to get special education programming in that building. That is our largest building, and that was a concentration of where we could place, I think, students at the time. I wasn't there, but that's my understanding. There was a actually addition renovation to Day at that site.
And your question about synergies, were you asking like if we could share staff, if the two programs could share staff?
Whether it was staff or whether it was programming, like I was wondering if they were placed at Day because there was, staff and programming synergies.
I understand. Yeah. No, the needs are also quite different.
Yeah.
You good, Linda?
Yes. I was really just trying to offer an idea. Would it alleviate some of the, the intrepidation about the incoming cohort to split it up? That's where I was getting at.
Thank you.
So I just want to thank you, first of all, for your presentation. I want to follow up on a few things, just so I'm clear. Superintendent, the Bigelow space is freeing up for next year?
That's right.
Okay, so are we contemplating moving one of the day programs to Bigelow?
We aren't, because Bigelow itself and its natural population due to the Cabot redistrict needs that space.
Okay, so we're going to be using that space and
Yep.
repurposing it
Yes.
for general education, essentially?
That's right.
Okay. Second, do we have any other rentals like this in the city, like the one we just are ending?
The Suzuki School next year.
That's a different rental because it's not within school hours.
We do
correct?
have students who tuition in. We have one student from Medfield Public Schools, is that right? Casey, who's tuitioning in.
Tuitioning in. So we have one from Medfield, Dover, Sherborne, Wayland.
And do we have a specific formula for calculating how much they pay?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
All right, and I presume that's been vetted and covers our costs at
Yes.
least? Okay, that's good to hear.
We know what we're doing.
I know you do, but I just want to ask the question anyways to make sure we get that out there.
It's sad to say it.
The stay put issue that you identified, is that a regulation or part of the state statute?
You tell me the difference?
Sure. So under statute, something that the legislature passes, it's written in the law. Regulation is something that DESE would promulgate as part of its duties to
It's a
regulate.
regulation.
I'm sorry, is it regulation or
A regulation.
regulation?
The
So
ratios, is that what you're asking about?
Pardon?
Stay put.
Yeah.
stay put.
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear on the stay put issue and what we might want to think of doing, because, we understand that educationally, if the system says it's better to change something, but there's essentially a veto power, that may not be, we have an institutional interest at least thinking about what the alternatives are here. So number one, if the parent says stay put, no matter what, that's it, or is there an appeal process?
Sorry, it's late and I'm a little fried. Stay put is both a federal mandate from IDEA, which is, as you know, not
Understand.
regulatory.
Yep.
And it has corresponding federal regulations. I can give you the citations, Mayor. It's also a procedural safeguard on IEPs. And then under the IDEA statutes, hold on, there are administrative judicial proceedings that might happen, and they can, through those, continue to assert their right to a stay put. So that's the governing piece.
So in other words, I just want to understand,
But Massachusetts has its own regulations, 603 CMR 2808, that allows for stay put to be invoked without filing formal due process complaints, simply by rejecting the proposed IEP.
and so that's the end of the discussion.
Yes.
And has there been any discussion at the superintendent level about changing that legislation?
In the burning list of things in special ed, this isn't the major one. I have to tell you that we're unique in this way because we are a destination for special education. and we don't have any MTSS for general education in many parts of the district, this is the only tool that parents think they have when they think their kids are in trouble. So they hold on to it for dear life and they don't let it up. That isn't the case in other districts. In other districts, there may be more of an orientation to, wow, I'd really like my kid to go back to just needing the normal kind of services that are provided in intervention in general education. So we do have a tension here that's different.
So your view is that with MTSS being successful over time, that will serve as an incentive for parents to feel more comfortable with the recommendation that's being made that their child doesn't need this type of service anymore, and it's actually more beneficial for the child to have another service.
Yes, I think it's a trust issue, right? That like, are we really providing the best tier 1 curriculum and experience with the highly trained teachers? And then do we have the interventions necessary if they need it? Otherwise, we run to special ed. And is it stable and not subject to removal? Right?
I think, at least I fully agree, and I think others do, that MTSS is a very good way, and it's, of course, far better to build trust with parents rather than be confrontational. Trust is the way to go, and so we ought to encourage it. Do we have, I just want to understand the scope of the issue. Do we have any sense of how many families is an issue for?
I don't have the numbers. What I can do is get anecdotal data from our team specialists, because you can imagine every year.
Just trying to get a sense of, are we addressing a problem for, I don't want to even use the word problem. Are we addressing a situation for 2 or 3 families? That's easier. Are we addressing it for dozens?
The number from last year, because I asked you this question, was 14 last year for state
14.
puts. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's something that hopefully we can build some trust with families that we're doing a
I don't
better
know what
job.
it is now.
Hopefully.
Right.
And it will be an ongoing continuum. Okay. That's very helpful. And I understand that much better. I won't be much longer. Give me one more second here. Could you just, the superintendent did a great job of asking you and you explaining the difference between psychologists and social workers and the different, I understand the difference, but the different roles they play in the schools. We also have a position called social emotional learner person, is SEL. What is that person doing? When was that role added? What are the deliverables for that role?
Sure. So SEL interventionists are Unit C. So they are the same level in terms of training as a behavior therapist. So they're only also at our elementary schools. So there's one at each elementary school, except for Ainger, where there are 2.
And when did we add those to the system?
I think it was around 2018. I asked our coordinator of SEL for elementary, and he believes it was around 2018. And we've added more since. And the idea is that they are providing about 80% of their time, tier 2, tier 3 behavioral supports for students. So this is a general education support. 20% of their time is responding to crises. And if they can, get into classrooms and do proactive preventative work.
And how does that fit in with the social work, which we've expanded the social work as well, and the psychologists? What's the interplay there? If you could just explain that.
Yeah, so psychologists and social workers typically are the ones who are dictating what the services are that a student in crisis would need, and an SEL interventionist would follow those instructions essentially, or the plan, the behavior plan. So they have the knowledge and the skills and the knowledge and the training to assess what a student needs. And then an SEL interventionist would be the person who implements that plan in the classroom with the student.
That's very helpful. Thank you for the explanation.
Yeah.
I'm all set.
Jason and Ben.
Thank you also and it's really helpful to hear all of the color on this important and very, very complex work. So I really appreciate it. It was just interesting to hear you talk about some of the who are the students we serve info. And I just wanted, this is more for like future data availability questions than a right now question, but these level of need for students on IEPs that the mayor was asking a question about before, understand that it's reflective of how much time they spend out of the gen ed class. but it sounded like you said that is something that DESE collects and standardizes across districts, or did I mishear that?
No, you did not. So DESE has, and you'll have to remind me what SIMS stands for, but there's
Yes.
Student Information Management System, which is information that the state collects every October 1st. There's codes that specify services or part of a student profile. In particular to level of need, the code is 10, 20, 40, 50, and I think there's a 500, which is like not applicable. Lowest need is 10, 20, 40 is sub-separate. And it's based on the amount of time that they are outside of the general education that's measured, that's in the service delivery grid of an IEP. So it is DESE coding. So I pulled it from our student information system this afternoon, actually, out of Aspen. Because I wanted to quickly show the need to the committee tonight based on that, and I knew that there was a level of need coding that I could use to pull a report.
Very helpful. And I think this brings me back to some of like benchmarking that I've looked at in past, where I believe our IEP percentages, reflective of what you've shared on these slides, is something like high teens for us, 18 or 19%. But I was surprised that there are other districts like Wellesley and others are, in similar percentages, but as I understand, have different dynamics. And so I guess I wonder, if I'm just playing it back correctly, this may not be the perfect metric for need intensiveness for some of the reasons that the mayor brought up, but nevertheless, we could do some of that benchmarking a little bit more to show what's maybe different here. And you would expect we may have more high need students
Correct.
than many other districts.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do benchmarking. Again, I wanted to give more to the committee tonight within the last 24 hours, just receiving some questions so I could answer. But I'm happy to do something a little bit more
I was
nuanced.
just curious about the nature of the availability, and thank you. Similarly, on slide 6, you made some comments about our distribution. Is this also reported to DESE, this sort of primary disability data, or no, that's not something we could look at and see differences?
Yeah, I tried to look to compare to see what other districts look like. This is not out of DESE. This is our actual population out of Aspen.
Thanks. And so when you made the comments, I believe, about some of the learning disability being more focal for us, that's, qualitative conversations and understanding versus other. I just wanted to make sure.
That's published
Okay.
in terms of what the state trends are and the national trends are. SLD is the most prevalent disability category.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Following up on some of the questions that Jonathan had about the watch list, or, sometimes I think of this as like we have our base case and we have an upside and a downside. This is a downside, more potential for more cost, if I'm thinking about that right. If we had that, is it correct to say that as it related to out-of-district costs, that aspect, that we would anticipate also getting a corresponding reimbursement increase along some percentage lines? So like the circuit breaker tuition credit that's 10 million would also grow. It wouldn't offset all of it, but the 1 million in potential increase would actually be a fraction of that.
Yes and no.
Is that right?
No, you are. It just depends every year on what the rate is that DESE sets for reimbursement.
But it's a percentage rate. So whatever.
That's right.
We would have an impact if the percentage changed across the whole base. But the additional potential overrun would have that same offset.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, I think it's wonderful that we are so inclusive. And so I want this next question to be recognizing that view that I have. My understanding is that there are, a continuum of needs reflective of, even though we have that model, some of our students do still end up going to out of district. And so I'm wondering about edge cases. And, some of the things that I've heard in past are those it's really helpful to know that we've done that analysis. It seems like on an average basis to show, hey, on average, keeping more of these students in district is actually saving. But I just wonder, this came from your slide 22, where we were talking about staff burnout and turnover. Like these are things that are tough to quantify, but anecdotally have heard, there's some populations of students that may not be integrated with their peers at all. That's just not in the cards for them, and may drive a lot of teacher burnout, et cetera. How do we think about those? Is that something that we're constantly on the edges, optimizing and having? I'm just curious your thought on that.
Yeah, I think that for our staff burnout or those that are highly stressed, it's not because of the profile of the student as much it is the amount of work and the lack of maybe additional people power that they're asking for. It's not the students, it's not the facilities. It really has to do with the training and the number of folks. There was another question. You mentioned something else that I wanted to make a comment about, but I forgot. It might come back to me.
Right, Ben?
Thank you, Casey, for the presentation and all the answers here. You've been in the hot seat for a long time. We appreciate it. I do want to say that I'm sorry, it's unfortunate that you came and met with us, many of us, for the first time in budget season of all times. That is what's driving the nature of our questions, and it will drive my questions in a minute. But we should acknowledge, or I'll acknowledge, I'm sure I speak for everyone, the good and important difference-making work that your team does. Dr. Nolan and Alicia and I went on a tour of South. We got to step into the Bright Room and take a look and chat with some students there.
Awesome.
And see how that program's going. We were at Williams last week. We met with Reflections parents, and we heard their stories and experiences. And I have kids at Zervis. I see Stride in action at Zervis every day. So the fact that we're oriented on the financials today is too bad. We understand, and we really are grateful and impressed by the team and all the work they do. Back to the math. How do we think about how many of the people and how much of the money on slide 5 is legally mandated? We've heard about the legal requirements. How do we understand how much of that is driven by that?
This is the, just so I make sure I'm looking at the same slide,
Salary cost.
the staffing and salary cost,
With the
972.8. Yeah. How do we think about it? So I looked at this. They're all legally mandated in different ways, right? So Section 504 for the guidance counselors, IDEA, Mass Special Ed law, that mandates them. But when my directors and I meet about the special ed staffing, we think more about the systems and practices that would benefit from some analysis in terms of whether or not we are keeping in mind culturally sustaining practices for our students, looking at trends. So are we tracking where we have a disproportionate number of males in a particular program, right? Like, I don't know if I would love to have all of our decision makers have a similar set of principles that we hold to be true, that we believe, that would guide us to make decisions differently. And I know I'm speaking kind of broadly, but when I think about the size of our district and how many people make decisions that impact staffing and therefore funding, I have to think about what is a standardized way of making decisions that still has a true north to it. Because again, we're in the business of humans. And so we can only standardize so much, but I am convinced that we can do it with heart and value. So I don't know if that answers your question about how we think about it, but that is what we're starting to think about or work on, which is how do we make decisions?
So the only position on this list that is not legally mandated by special ed or federal or state special ed laws is social workers. But they are mandated
Right.
by our collective bargaining agreement in the last NTA contract negotiations.
Okay. On at Reach, I think there was some disconnect. So, Dr. Nolan, I think you said we have kids in Gen Ed who would be in Reach if we had more staffing for Reach.
next year.
Okay, next, and I heard, Casey, you say that the kids in Reach would be out of district if we didn't have Reach.
Some of them would be, yeah.
But
Mhm.
not all. Okay, so
No,
there's
yeah, I
some-
mean,
okay.
yeah, I don't know their profiles well enough, but there is for sure some of them have high enough need that it wouldn't be right to have them in gen ed with no special education supports. And if we didn't have a program, they would have to go out of district.
So I was wondering, why wouldn't we just invest in the extra Reach to avoid the out of district, but not all Reach kids would wind up out of district. So that's why
Right.
okay, got it. All right, good. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we've got Ari, Mayor, and Tamika.
Thank you. Thank you, Casey. My question, I think, is actually for Anna or Liam. I know we kind of touched base on this a little bit before and we've talked about it, but just going back to special ed transportation, why are we at this kind of 61% versus that 75%? Is that Newton specific issue or is it a statewide issue? And just kind of what's going on there?
Sing it, Liam.
Okay, I'll try. So the transportation has actually been recently added the last couple of years. So it was all before, basically they call it instructional, but for the most part, it's actually a lot of it is just tuition. The state, is actually part of the Student Opportunity Act, actually added transportation. There was obviously this feeling, and obviously the districts, Newton, like many districts, are experiencing, a lot of special education transportation expenses. Our special ed transportation expenses are more than our yellow buses even. My understanding of the mechanism, though, is that the way that the law works is the state legislature funds the circuit breaker account. And the circuit breaker account first goal is to fill the districts with up to 75% reimbursement. And that 75% reimbursement is on instructional costs above a threshold. So that's why it's called circuit breaker. It has to trip a threshold. So I think it's approximately $60,000. Once it gets beyond that, they'll reimburse approximately 75% of eligible costs above that. So things like out-of-district tuition are certainly the areas that really will trip that circuit breaker. Once all of that 75% funding has then been pushed out, so the state has a formula, once that has been pushed out, they then will fill the remaining buckets of transportation. Right now, the remaining amount was only up to 61%. I think in the fiscal and ops report, though, I did report what I've read from the Mass Budget Policy Center. There's a separate legislation going through to potentially fill that additional transportation amount up to 75% as well. For Newton, that would be about another $330,000. So they first fill the instructional bucket, and then the second piece is the transportation. So I think we're going to see this dynamic because, again, the instructional piece for most districts continues to climb at very high rates, and the legislature is increasing this amount, but I don't think it's probably at the pace that districts are growing. I hope
Just to answer your question, the Mass Superintendents Association and recently our members sat with us, with the mayor at our legislative breakfast. We are, the superintendents across Massachusetts have put together a platform to advocate for moving from 75% reimbursement rate to 90%, to lower the per pupil or per student cost threshold to trigger aid sooner. So this would massively help us in the out of district tuition situation. I can tell you the bills regarding that. Also repairing the Chapter 70 formulas, which is not exactly related to special ed, but it is. Currently, a 4.5% inflation cap prevents the aid from matching real inflation in Chapter 70. So we have asked them to true that up in terms of the current rate of inflation. We've also asked to maintain at least $150 per pupil in FY27 because it's been flat for Chapter 70 per pupil aid, and to convene a comprehensive funding commission to figure out all of this, which is required every 10 years. But the crisis is real for every district. And, we are suffering, but there are districts who are suffering more. Rural schools. Transportation, we've asked for 100% reimbursement, and for non-regional, initiate funding for that reimbursement. Every single district is facing what we are facing. And with the volatile enrollment changes, the charter school reimbursements that are happening. Just in Newton, we have a new charter school that's opening at the South Campus called Felix School. That will be a threat if students choose to matriculate to that, we're going to lose those funding pieces. So those are things that we are pushing quite heavily. We also have additional pieces in terms of rural schools, which doesn't help us, except that it does, because they get other funds that perhaps could be distributed differently across the state. So we're aggressing on that, but it's a long process, a lot of meat grinder work that's about to happen.
Thank you.
Laredo?
Just briefly, I want to just second what the superintendent said about asking for additional state funding. The superintendents at the breakfast were both unanimous and vocal with the state legislative delegation about some of the shortfalls in funding, and that certainly would be helpful to us as a community, along with every other community there. And the superintendent's also right that this is, we're not the only system struggling with wanting to do the best possible thing and not having all the resources. We're actually, I think, in better shape than most. That doesn't mean we're perfect, but we are in better shape than most. I do want to just quickly pick up on a question Ben raised, and you were answering about the review of your internal processes at Word standardization. When do you think you're going to that work completed?
I think the short answer is I don't know. It's not a defined process in the way that the caseload analysis is, but it's ongoing.
Well, I would.
Which process do you want to hear about?
The process for standardizing across a lot of different decision makers, looking at the same factors when you're deciding what services a child needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
Well, Casey, I mean, we can't trump the individual education IEP process.
That's not what I'm suggesting, but even with the individual education process, there sounds like there's a lot of decision makers involved, and they may be looking at things somewhat differently all the time.
Yeah, so I think you're asking for a timeline, and I don't have a timeline set for that. It's something that we've started to talk about this year as with our student services coordinators.
Maybe,
Or administrators.
Madam Chair, it's something we could put in an agenda for like a 6-month or 9-month follow-up, just so we can get a quick progress report in it.
Yeah, certainly. We could take it up a docket.
Thank you. That's great.
Thanks, Alicia. Two things. The first is giving some historical context around the CAPS Collaborative, why it's kind of funky, and as we look to change or alter it. And the second is a process question that I'd like to reserve for when we excuse Casey, who has, yes, been here for quite a while. So after Casey leaves, I'd like to address the committee regarding our budget process and the overviews there too. So first, it's important to understand, while I support the thinking of taking a look at our existing contracts with the CAPS Collaborative and analyzing whether it positions NPS in the best light financially. I think it's also helpful context to understand that when that program came in and we became essentially a lessor for that program, it was to take the place of Newton's own deaf and hard of hearing program that we as a district were providing to EDCO, as they were essentially bringing students from EDCO into Newton to access our deaf and hard of hearing program, which was very highly regarded, and with the staff that was in NPS to provide these services, to service a cohort of students within NPS who needed these services. So the EDCO students were essentially bolstering the numbers of like students who were deaf and hard of hearing and accessing the same services and the same, inclusive environment. So when EDCO went bankrupt and this was dissolved, those students were left, and that program was left kind of up in the air, flat, had nowhere to go. The CAPS Collaborative coming in was seen as a way to ease that transition. And so, like I said, I agree that we should take a look back and see can we do better with that financial arrangement? But that's where we were coming from. And that's important context. I can go further as members want, but that's the overview.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions while we have Casey and Liam? No? All right. Thank you
Liam's
so
not
much.
going anywhere.
Yeah. Thank you, Casey.
Casey, thank you.
I think Tamika had one more item and
You. And for that, I have props. So my process item is that it's highly, highly, highly unusual for us to be having this conversation that we had today without something that looks like that. This is a very old superintendent's proposed budget from the year 2020. This was given to me. This isn't mine. I had no part in this, but it was given to me by my predecessor in this seat, Diana Fisher Gomberg, and it accompanies a trove of school committee proposed, school committee approved budgets going back some 15 years. Those live in my basement. As we started our meeting on Monday, I was surprised, is a banal way of saying it, but the more accurate way is dumbfounded that we were having that discussion without having anything that looks like this. This is 2021, my first budget, proposed budget, 22, 23, 24, 2025, 2026, and as a bonus, I even have the presentation that accompanied the 2026 budget proposal. What you should notice about these budget proposals is that they are very, very long and they are very, very complex. They have line items with FTEs in every single department, every single building, every single student-facing service, or every single cost that the NPS budget represents. That's what we should be discussing. The overviews that we've had, including tonight's overview from our Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, those are great. They help to frame the conversation. They help us to focus in on the things that we'd love to have, the things that we're struggling with, the cost drivers that are impacting what makes running a school in this modern day so difficult and complex. They are not this. And so we cannot have these conversations in any meaningful format without being able to refer back and pull up a budget and just be able to open it up while someone is speaking or in preparation for their speaking to be able to say, hey, I see we have X number of positions here as proposed, and I see that that's a change of 3% over last year. Why is that? Being able to see those details and specifically address those details is your right as a school committee member. It is my right as a member of this committee, and it is our duty, statutory duty, to do a line-by-line analysis of the budget that we are charged with approving. And when it's ready for approval, instead of this proposed form, it becomes this. But to get to this, we first do these meetings, and we are nowhere near as prepared to have these discussions as we should be. And like I said, that is a deviation from the norm and a process issue that I'm just flagging for the committee. I understand there's a fix, and we will get this budget book, promises Monday. I also understand that there was there is a very hurried, I understand, stressful process of getting this to us by Monday. And I'm sorry, not sorry for that, but it is our right as a committee to have it to guide these discussions. That's it. Thank you.
And you do have resolution because I let you know today at 3 o'clock that we would have the budget book. Okay, just making sure. All right. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.